Murph, you got to behave now, buddy. Murph. Come lie down. Come lie down. Come. Murphy, come. Come. Murph, come here. Come here. Or others are going to kick you out. Murphy, come. Come on, bud. Lie down. Come lie down. Murphy, come. Murphy, come. Come on, lie down.
And here we go. Welcome to the Tom Adams Show. I'm excited that you're here with us today. And today's a cool day. We get to meet a really cool cat. Mike Sullivan is someone who grew up in a typical middle-class neighborhood on Long Island, eating New York bagels, buttered rolls, and drinking Yoo-Hoo. I don't have a clue what Yoo-Hoo is, but we're going to learn about that. His story in a few words: competitive spirit, entrepreneurship, and service to others. Competitive sports throughout his youth really wasn't enough. Since that, he's run, 35 marathons, including the Boston Marathon 15 times. He's competed in triathlons, and he's even finished an Ironman triathlon, so that's a nasty beast. When it comes to entrepreneurship, Mike has built and sold several businesses over the past 30 years. Throughout his professional life, he's continued to engage in his community. For many years, he worked with Special Olympics athletes. He's worked with at-risk youth as a volunteer coordinator for more than 14 years, and he's run nonprofit fundraisers for local charities. Currently, he's president of a community ballet organization. So this man has it all going on. In this chapter of his life, Mike is a certified functional health and wellness coach with a special focus on helping entrepreneurs improve their personal and professional lives. Mike Sullivan, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thanks, Tom. I'm really excited to be here today with you.
Yeah, it's really cool to have you here. So I'm just going to dive in because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. So April 15th, 2013, you were running the Boston Marathon on the day of the bombing. Tell me what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, that still brings back lots of thoughts and memories and things I'm probably still processing through, but it was quite a day. And I guess just to bring some perspective to it, it's so many things, but I think what jars us most is when we kind of meet the unexpected in anything. But just to give you a little perspective, with the Boston Marathon, it's the only race that, one, it's on a Monday, right? It's a holiday in Massachusetts, so the whole state is shut down. The whole city, and really it's a festive celebration of Patriots Day. And everything pretty much revolves around the marathon. I mean, unless you want to get up at sunrise and go see the Battle at Lexington, where they reenact that every year. But once that's over, then everything tends to, lead towards the marathon. So everybody's off, everybody's celebrating. It's very festive. You have nowadays probably 30,000 runners coming in. And what's unique about it too is that they all have to qualify for the race. So it's the only race in the country where you have to qualify. And probably, I think the number I heard was maybe less than 1% actually can qualify. And then once you qualify, then you have to be in that allotment of those 30,000. So I say that just because it's a big deal for the runners that actually make it. And so many come and just run it once. But I have the great fortune of having run it 15 times. So one of the great things about running it, in the latter years was seeing all these first timers, right? And just the energy and the unbridled enthusiasm. And people always talk about, like, they want to know what's your advice for running this course because it's so unique. And you tell them, and of course, then they dismiss all the advice, kind of like business owners,
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can't tell somebody what they don't know. But anyway, so just all the excitement, all the energy and everything just leads up to this. It's just incredibly festive. And then, the race, we go about the race, and I'd finished, and we flew up for the first time, and I was staying at the Marriott Copley Place, which is literally a half block from Boylston Street, which is where the finish line is.
Right.
And I was literally done with the race by the time I got back to the hotel, just in some warm-ups in the lobby, having a beer and nachos and celebrating as so many other families and their friends and people in the community. And also I saw two kind of young, sharp, but casual looking guys walking pretty purposefully past me with their phones out. And it just struck me that they were plainclothes cops, when in fact they were just two young guys that happened to be at the race. I kind of my eyes followed them and saw them go over to these TVs. And then, of course, that's where they learned that the bombings had literally just happened. We didn't hear it. It was just so much noise in the lobby. Wow. And, the chaos ensued. So we just went to our hotel, up to our room, and we're there for the next 4.5 hours. And my daughter, Sienna, was just turned 6 at the time. So she's literally jumping from the radiator of the bed. We're trying to absorb everything that's happening on the TV, like what's next for us. And, do we try to leave? Do we stay here? What's the smart thing to do? So for 4.5 hours, that was simply what's going through our minds. And, by about then hearing all the other things, there was another explosion across town. We had a few friends still out on the course. So, and plus we had everybody calling and texting us in terms of where were we and so on. So it was a crazy, really intense time. And, but they did by 8 o'clock, I think things had settled down. They had a full, understanding of what had really gone on. At least the law enforcement did. We were still getting little bits and drabs of it. But so it was the only day that we've actually flown to Boston. I mean, every other year we've always driven up. So in a lot of ways, maybe it was a good thing, because it probably would have been a foolish idea to get in the car and try to get out of the city, because literally everything was blocked off. If we looked down below our window, there were ambulance and EMT vehicles, like fully across, 3 lanes, and as far, down the street as we could see, just waiting to be, engaged as necessary. But so just really crazy. And I guess when we went down to the lobby about 8 o'clock, they said you're allowed to go out the back door if you need to go out and get something to eat. The restaurant was shut down. Everything in the hotel was really shut down. But when we got downstairs, there was Boston Fire, Boston cops, FBI, federal agents, National Guard. And, they're in fatigues and, automatic weapons. And it just was like, this feels like we're in some other country, right? This doesn't happen here in the States. So it was really just probably too much to process in the moment. In fact, we eventually caught up with our friend, and she turned onto Boylston Street, and it's about a quarter of a mile, and she was trying to get to the finish line, and they just directed her the opposite direction. And she's like, no, I need to get to the finish line. Like, no, you don't understand, something happened. And they wouldn't tell her what happened. They just tried to direct her and the thousands of others coming through. And her mother lives in Brookline, so she happened to be walking by a storefront window and saw a TV and was able to read like the ticker along the bottom. So we ultimately were able to get a hold of her, right? And she did get back to her mother safely. But, obviously there's a lot of,
Oh, can only
a lot of
imagine.
people, yeah, just horrible, just, how people got injured and everything, whether it was just, still, pretty intense to think about it. But ultimately, the next day, we still had to hang around all day, and half the city was shut down. We got a 6-year-old with us, so we're trying to make it normal. And at the same time, frankly, we're trying to process what happened.
Yeah. Oh,
Um, but we got home, and then, of course, that night we're watching the shootout in Newton, right, in a typical middle class neighborhood that they hadn't caught the two guys
right,
yet. So that
right.
continued just to filter. Where I think it was Thursday, right? The race was Monday. We got home late Tuesday night. It was Thursday. I was driving. I just called my wife and realizing that, like, I think I'm now just processing what we just dealt with over the last few days. But, so very fortunate, right? Fortunate to be able to have an experience to go up there. Fortunate that we were all safe and all of our friends were safe. Devastating to those, that were in harm's way and got injured in that. But
Yeah. Quite
it's,
an experience that you just hold with you too.
yeah, and it's still, as you talk about it, right? You realize it's still, it's experiences like that stay deep within us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, on a lighter note, I mean that's a pretty heavy way to start, but you've run a lot of marathons. I think like 35, I think it is, right?
Yeah, I've run 35, and it's never been the goal to run 35. But I've always been, quietly intense. I think is, you might have even coined that of me, but it's really true. And always having been competitive through my younger years and through school. When I get out of school, I was starting into my professional career, and it's really important to me to try to find some sort of balance and stay healthy and fit, because that's something that's always been really important to me. So I got into the marathon because ultimately I wanted to do an Ironman, and I felt like I needed to at least understand what it meant to run a marathon, since that's part of the Ironman race. So I got into that, and just kind of got the bug, got set on wanting to run, a goal time. And the one thing about the marathon is there's the race, but then there's the training and the mental preparation. I think far beyond the physical preparation is just, it's a place of self-discovery, I think, right? For me, it has been like I've learned more about myself in, a 3-hour training run, or in running the race that you put, 16 weeks of preparation into. And you don't always, you can't dictate how the day is going to go. You can
Right.
get yourself in such physical shape, but you have to be physically ready, mentally ready. And then who knows what the day is going to bring. Is it going to, is what you eat that morning, is it going to not settle quite right? Is is the temperature going to be too warm? Is it going to be windy? Are other things just going to surface? So it was always, to me, it just fascinated me. And then I just kind of got on this, thing of I wanted to hit, this goal time, and then maybe I'd go off to do something else. But it took me about 20 races, and I realized I'm still learning how to race it,
Mm,
which,
interesting.
for a long time, like, oh, like I can run it, but,
Right.
can I race it, right? Maybe the racing is only for the elite runners, but
Hmm.
I ultimately hired myself a coach, learned, got a few little tweaks to what I was doing, nothing really different. Then all of a sudden I was able to achieve my goal 3 of like my next 5 races. So that I've been trying, for so long for. So just, there's a lot that goes into it. I think the other part too for me was that it was a real distinct break from the intensity of my business.
Mm,
I think that's really important for anybody that's in business, that, have another hobby, have a habit, have something that kind of breaks the intensity of the day in, day out of work. I mean, it could be
right.
something as casual as like even painting or something, I think, for some, right? Just something
Yep.
that's
Yep.
totally takes your mind away from the work aspect and allows your mind to drift, be creative, just relax. And, frankly, with the running, yeah, even a 3-4 mile run is it's mentally relaxing. It's almost like, over the years, that might have been my meditation, because I'd come back from a light run and be fully re-energized. The things I was struggling with before that run, all of a sudden, were all mentally falling into place.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big reason why the marathon became such a thing for me. And then,
Well,
yeah, I mean, just so many.
yeah. I mean, there's an interesting distinction though, because there's something about the marathon that is like, um, it's not like going, and doing a 30-minute workout in your basement. There is a whole lot of prep that goes into it. There's a whole lot of thinking, and I mean, you got to have this. My guess is, because I've never run a marathon. The most I've run is like a 5K, and even that astounded me. And when I think about what you run on a regular basis, there's a level of grit underneath there that you have to have. Like, where does that come from? What fuels that drive to just keep pounding the miles?
Yeah, and again, I think it comes back to it's where I say I think it's so much more mental, and I think there really are a lot of correlations between that and business, right? You're in both of them for the long run. Anybody that thinks they're getting into a business and flip it quickly is, largely mistaken. Um, and I think with both of them, you can physically prepare, you can mentally prepare, and with both of them, you're going to have to overcome adversity at some point.
Mm,
I had a running coach one time that said, you know, you always have you have one more cup, right? So as you're going through a race, it's not a matter of if you're going to be uncomfortable, if you're going to meet adversity, you're going to. And a lot of times you're going to kind of run right through that, and you'll come out and you'll find that extra cup, right, of energy, or whatever that might be. And I think it's so true with business as well, right? Like it's not a matter of in business if we're going to face adversity; it's a matter of when. And
right,
I think when we do, then what are we made of, right? I think that's where
right,
genuine entrepreneurs really. Um, that's when they learn about themselves and learn about their business and how to take it to the next level. Is those that understand adversity. I mean,
yeah,
I don't say it literally per se, but if a young entrepreneur would come to me and they hadn't run a business before, it's hard to tell them kind of what to expect or how to
right,
experience it. To some I might say, like, if they're really raw, go run a marathon and then come back and talk to me,
right,
right? Because you get it's similar in that
yeah,
you have to prepare. It's preparing for a long run. It's not just a matter of showing up and being really at your best for one day. You have to be largely at your best for those 12 to 16 weeks of training, and then
right,
race day. There's still no guarantees.
right,
So I think those of us that have run many marathons, and people that haven't run a marathon, they say, "Oh, my goal is X," whatever the time might be, and I'll kind of quietly smile and be like, "But keep that in mind, because that's what fuels you and helps motivate you to get across the finish line. But the ultimate goal, the ultimate reward is crossing the finish line."
yeah, yeah,
And once people
yep,
have done it, then they can go back and go, okay, now I have some perspective. Now I understand what that means, or, you know, um, and now they can take what they learned with that and apply it going forward. And I think it's so true with business as well, right? And it's with either one of them, it's really about overcoming that adversity to maintain like your
right,
forward momentum.
right, right. So, you've been talking a little bit about the marathon, but you've also implied, companies and entrepreneurship. So you've had more than one company to date. Tell me a little bit about your path, your entrepreneurial path. Like, give me a sort of a 30,000 foot view of the journey.
Yeah. So I got out of school and I was, studying marketing management, and I would totally go accounting and finance all day long going forward, but that's a conversation for another day. And anyway, I found myself in Boston in sales and really loved the sales process and that line of work. But I was afforded an opportunity to come back and get involved with a small family business, a moving company.
Hmm.
And again, coming back into a small family business, well, that's a conversation and a book for another day as well. But lo and behold, as I got back into it, it was much smaller, much more raw, even though the business had been around for many, many years. Um, and um, that's really where I learned business. I learned so much in terms of what it was going to take to be in business, and
Right.
I learned a lot about myself. I hadn't run the marathons at that point, so I didn't have that
Hmm.
sense of grit. But I did have my sales experience and my competitiveness from earlier years to rely on the fact that I knew this was going to take something different if I was to stay in it.
Right.
And I was going to really have to grow this business. This wasn't a business that I was afforded the opportunity to come in and coast with, but I was brought in really to, take it somewhere and do something with it.
Got it.
So, so I started with that, and ultimately that was probably 89, 1990.
Okay.
And I spent a good number of years in that business. I guess it was 1990. And in 97, I came across another industry, the records management industry, largely storing boxes. It was kind of the glamorous side of a storage company, in that you could put a box in the shelf and deliver a file, learn how to make money with it, as opposed to, really the insanity of the moving industry. I mean, it's a crazy business. It's a crazy world. It's a crazy lifestyle, just the intensity of it, all the moving pieces to it. Frankly, as I look back, it was the perfect testing ground, for me, in terms of having to try to figure it out. And, when I look back on that, so that's what kind of got me really going with business. And I think it was the lessons learned in the moving company that allowed me, when I got into the records management business, to really flourish with it, because I was able to take what I'd learned. And it was an industry where things were, I feel like a lot simpler, a lot more stable, a lot more friendly in so many ways. So coming out of the intensity and the craziness of the moving industry and taking what I learned, it really positioned me to really do well with that business. And, I'd say that probably the three, a few of the key things for me were, as I got into that business, was, just understanding like what it is, what coming into it. Because as an entrepreneur, we all go into a business with a certain level of expertise. Might be in that industry, might not. It may just be that, we have some expertise in terms of how to build or grow a business. But what was really important to me there was, understanding what I knew, and I knew how to sell. But what was the lesson was recognizing what I didn't know. And with what I didn't know, what was really important there was to let the ego go, and don't grind and try to figure this out for the next 5 years. Go find out the people that do know. Find out go meet the experts, learn from them, and try to 10 times that knowledge, like really, really quickly. If you have to, if you can engage people and build relationships and learn, what it is you need to know, perfect, right? I had a few different, I built relationships with those in my industry where I'd met with probably 7 of the top 10 CEOs in my industry, and built relationships with them, and was invited to their facilities to learn what they did. And that was in a really short period of time. And then I had, I knew sales. And the one thing I knew was I needed to generate sales, because this company had very little in revenue. What I didn't know was, as I grew my sales, from like 180,000 to 500,000 and $1 million, was that the expenses and all the headaches were going to chase them. Right. So what I really needed to understand was accounting and finance, right? And operations, and how all this goes together, so that at the end of the day, you can, check out with a profit, right? And be in the black. So, I had a longtime family friend who was incredible with finances and looking at numbers and how to apply them to what I was trying to do. I had a godfather who came from that industry, so he helped me with the operational side. And frankly, all he wanted was a cheap bottle of wine on occasion, right? I didn't have to go out and pay a lot for that advice. But then, I also went out and I hired a consultant, right? And I needed to find that. And, that was a time where I felt like I couldn't afford a consultant. But the next question I kind of asked myself was, can I afford not to hire that consultant? Right. Yeah. So really, I think it was learning learning to recognize what I knew, and then more importantly, what I didn't, go out and find it. And 2 then was recognizing my value to the company, and realizing, where do I need to be in the business? So, it's been said, like, you have to spend a certain amount of time working in your business, but more importantly, you have to spend a certain amount of time working on your business. And that was a really a good lesson from me. And, I think something else within that to understand like what you should be working on. Obviously, your areas of expertise. If you don't have the expertise, is it somebody? Do you have to hire them? In my case, it was people that understood bookkeeping. Right, I didn't need to spend my time on what some might call $10 or $15 an hour work. Hire somebody else to do that part-time basis, so I can work on the big things. And then, third thing is just once you learn those things, is trust your gut. And trust yourself to go out and empower others, employees, and learn to be a leader. So learn to delegate to others, which, when you're starting out, that's pretty vulnerable because you're not even sure exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
So to articulate to somebody else so they can do that, but it's never be absolutely a must that you figure it out so you can teach them and then empower them to do it and sit back and let them go. So those are three lessons that really came into play in my subsequent businesses in terms of really understanding how to run them and run them profitably and run them in a way that I would thrive as well. Because in my first business, I was running hard, but I was not thriving.
That was the moving company.
The moving company, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So just long story short, 1990, I got into that business. 97. I started Automated Record Center, a small box storage company. We had, about 12 pallets of boxes. And then all of a sudden, before we knew it, we had, nearly $250,000. And I just learned and grew along the way. Right. And subsequently, shortly after that, realized that the moving industry was not a place to be. So I had to spend a couple of years building value in that so that I could then sell it.
Got it.
And that was important to me. And I just want to say that was important to me for a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't a business I saw myself staying in long term for a couple of reasons. One, just the nature of the business. Margins were small. I was in a small market. I just didn't see the longevity in it. Moving would always be around in a small market or in any market, right? Technology won't ever change how you can move household goods and such. But at the same time, it wasn't going to be a lifestyle that I could sustain.
Yeah, right. So you've talked a lot about some of the lessons you learned, but did you hit any walls? Did you hit any sort of major walls that sort of you ran into that forced you to stop and take notice and stand back and go, what do I do now? Like what along the way? Because to me, entrepreneurial life is full of running into walls and figuring your way out through them. And it kind of weirdly ties back to your marathon capabilities. But I wonder in business, did you hit any of those?
Yeah, no, it's funny you just say that. And the correlation is just that, right? With the marathon, every mile is another, 7 minutes, whatever, to look at and say, how am I feeling? How is this going? Right. And you're just, in your head, you're counting down from 26 miles. You're just doing math, right? 25 to go, 24 to go. Oh, 16 to go. I've run 16 before, and you're doing all the mental, gymnastics in your head. But with business, it's the same, right? If you're starting out, it's how do I get to that first 100K? How do I get to, 250,000? How do I get from 250 to 500, 500 to a million, right? A million to 5. Right. Every one of those plateaus is, there are plenty of stumbling blocks in between, right? It's, and those are those moments of adversity, having to figure something new out. And so, I think just every step of the way you find those, and it's, the key is, right? Like people want to do business with a company that's sustaining upward momentum. Nobody wants to do business with a company that's on a downward spiral, right? We see it all the time, but the new big box comes in and they're like the new it's, we want to go there. And it's the same thing with any of our businesses, no matter what it is. So overcoming those obstacles and hurdles, and, just an example in the moving business, I didn't study finance and accounting, right? I'd go to the bank and say, I need to buy a truck. And they say, well, we'll get back to you in a few weeks as to whether you qualify, right? So I'm waiting on them to do some, banker's calculation. And it just struck me like, why don't I know the calculation?
Right.
And they'll come back to me 3 weeks later and say, yep, you qualify for the loan. And I'll say, okay, that's good. I really need the truck, but I would ask myself, okay, so they've determined this is a good deal for them.
Right.
I have to determine
Right.
whether it's a good deal for me. Like, do I need this
Yeah.
truck? And then what are the financial consequences by taking on a note of, whatever the magnitude might be, 100,000,
Right.
for that truck, and
Right.
then amortizing that over time and just really understanding those numbers. So my early years, I worked closely with at a local banker, and he was
Mm.
fantastic, and he'd help educate me from his perspective. I had this lifelong friend who was a good advisor in terms of just playing off of him. Do you need the truck? Can you navigate this other ways? Can you rent a truck or whatever it might be? But learning that and then realizing that I needed a really good accountant, right? Like the numbers weren't my strength. Ironically, over time, the numbers have become one of my strengths because I really worked with them, not just to give it to them and say, you do it and tell me at the end of the year whether we made it, we're a thumbs up or thumbs
Right.
down.
Right.
But I really needed to learn my numbers so I could really use them in managing my business every day.
Mm.
Um, and it's interesting because I talk with clients often and others and entrepreneurs, and a lot of times they're fuzzy around their numbers. Like they
Yeah.
can't give you very specifics. And, that has consequences on multiple levels. I mean, the consequences of just are you able to run your business as effectively as you can? But then there's a stress level to that too, like having to depend on others and almost using, what's their perspective on these numbers?
Right.
Do they line up with what I think they are as opposed to
Yeah.
truly knowing?
Yeah.
Um, and to that end, it's interesting is that a client this morning texted me. He just got his QuickBooks like fully operational. His accountant spits out the report for him on a weekly or monthly basis. And he said, something that struck me this morning was in being able to look at those numbers. He said, my stress levels went down at least 2 notches.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
he didn't recognize it was there before. But then
Right.
when all of a
Right.
sudden he had the ability to look at these reports and really, micromanage and look at these numbers and do the analytics, it was just a game changer for him. And it's true for all of us, right? So
Right. Right.
many tend to shy away from it, but sometimes that's the difference between really understanding the value of your company and just, thinking the value of your company.
Yeah. So I'm going to bridge this. When did health then become an issue? Because you're building these companies, you're involved, you sell your moving company, you're building another company. And as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of times, even if we're running, even if we're marathoning, something else shows up. So when did health become a factor for you, and what transpired? What showed up for you?
Yeah, I guess there were a number of, I'll call them markers. Early years when I had the moving company, I retained a commercial driver's license. That way, if I was short a driver, the driver walked up the job. Like who knows, right? Anything happened in the moving company business. But if I needed to be able to move a truck, I had a commercial driver's license to do it. One of the requirements of a commercial driver's license is that you have to have a medical card. Now, I was 6 feet, 178 pounds, 5 weeks off of running a marathon. And I go in to get my medical card renewed. And they tell me they can't renew it because my blood pressure is too high.
Wow.
And I'm arguing with them that, you know, I'm clearly fit. There are 400-pound guys climbing out of the cabs of these trucks with a Mountain Dew and a Twinkie and chips in their hands. And like, how are they getting certified? Apparently their blood pressure was, within range. Mine wasn't, but it was the first time. So I would have to go out and actually, and this was the stress, the intensity of the moving business. It was the stress of the
Right.
moving business. So
Right.
I'd get up in the morning, I'd go for a 6 or 8 mile run, come home, shower, I go directly to the doctor's office to get my blood pressure taken.
Right. Right. Right.
And it would be in normal range. So they gave me the medical card. Now that was all well and good. I got the card, but big picture is what was it doing to me, right? Because I knew by 4 o'clock, I'm back in the rat race, and my
Yeah.
my stress is up and my blood pressure is likely up as well. So that was just that was a marker, something to pay attention to. A couple of years later, I was getting an insurance exam, and they said you've got two autoimmune issues here. You're hypothyroid and you've got ITP, which are low platelets. And I
Hmm.
reached out to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he said, go check with them. They probably pulled the wrong file, or when they did your blood work, they probably switched, the blood draws. But went back and checked, and they said, nope, that's actually yours. So with and then there was also this other WPW, Wolff Parkinson White syndrome, which basically meant I was born with an extra electrical circuit in my heart. So that was the next one. And that's where I went to a cardiologist, and he's like, well, you just got to change your lifestyle. Like, you can't afford to have like adrenaline rushes, because that will trigger your heart to race at maybe a couple hundred beats a minute. And that sort of thing obviously can lead to a heart attack or an arrhythmia and so on. So that was probably the first.
Yeah.
So that was the first time. He's like, do you sense this? I'm like, no, I've never sensed it. Like, I run 50 miles a week and so on. I've never experienced it. But you go home and you kind of, I'm talking to my wife, and you're discussing it, and like, well, maybe I just have to change my lifestyle. And in talking to him further, he's like, well, Mike, he goes, it's not like you're going to win the Boston Marathon, right? And that was,
ouch.
That was that was the telling moment, only in that it was a dismissive way to say you just need to change your lifestyle. But at the same time, to tell somebody that has a pretty rigorous lifestyle, you just have to change it, didn't sound like the right advice. So ultimately, I go to another cardiologist, said, oh, we've got so much technology nowadays. And ultimately, I went in for a procedure, and they just burn out that extra circuit, and it's not something that can ever come back again, but you do bear the slight risk of going through a procedure like that. But even with that one, I went through it. A week later, I was running again and never had to worry about it. In hindsight, I was having those arrhythmias, and I really learned of it. I think I wanted to ignore it because I'd wear a heart rate monitor for training. And at times, I think it would race, and I just chalked it up to being, error, in the device. But I was running Boston to 1 year, and I even checked my doctor before, and I said, listen, I'm having the surgery in June, but got the race in April. What's your advice? He's like, well, if you haven't had these experiences, he said, I think you're probably okay to race. So I get to like mile 13 in the race, and my heart rate monitor, which is running perfectly smooth, my heart rate jumps from like 144 to like 209. And I'm about 4 miles from what they call Heartbreak Hill. And Johnny Kelly statue, runners would understand it all, but Heartbreak Hill is just the fourth of 4 successive hills. And that's kind of when you get there, then you're on the downward slope to the finish line. But I actually thought to myself, do I stop? Don't I stop? Recognizing this happened before. Honestly, I thought, well, maybe if I go down, I guess I'm going down at the Johnny Kelly statue. But as I turned and headed for the 4 hills, it kicked right back into normal. And then it was fine ever since. But I was able to go back to my doctor and say, I have had these. So anyway, the procedure was certainly worthwhile, because I've been able to stay incredibly active since, and it's not something that would come back again. So that was probably the first really big marker for me. And then just a few years later, trying to address the hypothyroidism and the autoimmune and the ITP, I just felt like it's worth going down this road to figure out why, because I'd be going to my doctors and they'd be wanting to either remove a spleen for the ITP or give me, more medication for the thyroid. And I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm physically active and all this, and otherwise, perfectly healthy. There's got to be a reason. So that's where I got involved with, I sought out a functional medicine doctor, and all the functional medicine doctors I've worked with, I mean, they're all MDs, right? They all have their medical degrees, but they go the route of, studying functional medicine. And that's largely what really helped bring me to where I am now. And even in terms of the coaching, because everything I've learned and been able to change with my own health, I think is just so important to anybody. But I think entrepreneurs, particularly, we have such an ability to go singularly focused, put the blinders on, and ignore it all from our health, right? Even the
Yep.
relationships, those things outside of our business, and we can get all consumed by it. So I think it's really important to know, to help educate them and help entrepreneurs and business owners learn that you can strike that balance. It's never the 50-50 balance that people talk about, but we can strike that balance to where we can be really healthy and actually thrive more in the business environment than grinding and burning the midnight candle night in, night out, succeeding, but knowing all along the way that we're losing something here, and we don't have to.
Right, right, right. So, just step back with me for a bit, because you describe um, functional medicine and maybe traditional medicine. Some might call it Western medicine. But what's the distinct difference between functional medicine and traditional or Western medicine?
Yeah. So if I describe the two, like, so basically conventional or Western medicine, right there, and it's forever, it's been, we don't feel well, we go to the doctor, and they look at us and give us something to make us feel better again.
Mhm.
Maybe a very simplistic answer is, but maybe we have a loose floorboard in our house, and every now and then you walk over that, you trip, you hit your head, and you go to the doctor's office and they put an ice pack on there. Maybe they give you some ibuprofen for it, or, and then you go home, and soon, eventually you go hit that floorboard again, you get right in the head, and you go
Right.
back and you get treated for it again. Um, Conventional Western medicine is really just simply designed to help eliminate the symptoms, right? The pain that we have. Functional medicine will actually go and look at and talk to us and follow the trail back to go, oh, why don't we, if we fix the loose floorboard, we're not going to have to treat you with an ice pack, or, the ibuprofen,
Mm,
or the steroids, whatever it might be. Basically, functional medicine is actually going back and looking at the root cause of your issues, and then
wow.
treating with absolutely treating with medication, right, and prescription where necessary, but also recognizing that there's so many holistic ways to change and improve our health, right? For me, going back just with the blood pressure, I didn't have any like mindful exercises, I didn't have any tools in my toolbox to understand how to reduce my stress. Like
Mm,
my
yep.
I guess my way of reducing my stress was going home and going for a 6, 8, 10 mile run,
Right,
which
right.
obviously was helpful, but it was also, when I look at everything I was doing, working 12, 14, 16 hour days, whatever, some variations of those throughout a week, working 6 and 7 days a week, doing all that running,
Yeah.
and probably my demise amongst others, but probably the primary one is I really ignored sleep for a long, long time.
Mm,
Um, with all that running alone, I probably just needed 8 hours a night of sleep. But let alone the intensity and the stress of the business, I probably need even a little bit more. But when I'm
right.
running on, 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep a night, and in some ways probably feeling that's a badge of courage that I can do all this,
Mm,
I didn't realize that truly is likely that some dietary choices, amongst others, probably, just taking the sleep, stress, and diet are probably where my autoimmune issues showed up, which is
mm,
are not uncommon. That's typically how many people do,
right.
right? So so these functional medicine doctors might take more of a lifestyle approach.
Got
We
it.
might
Got it.
start with like the diet, right? Because I think the three things that really impact us from our health standpoint are our gut. We've learned a lot in recent years that all of our health and or disease really comes from the gut having, just a disrupted, just a gut lining and so on. The other one is just the toxins in our community, right, and in our environment, and then stress. So
Hmm.
I think,
Yeah, interesting. So, um, let's try and tie these together, because you come from a entrepreneurial background. You're a marathoner. You hit your own walls related to your own health, and then at some point along the way, it sounds like you sell your businesses and you embark on becoming a functional health and wellness coach. Tell me a little bit about the reasons why you left traditional business and moved into health and wellness coaching.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going from traditional business. I guess what it is doing is going from brick and mortar, right, to what a lot of they're not millennials these days, but people are going more to
Yep.
like consulting type businesses and so on. Initially it seemed like a big leap, but over time, as I look back on it, it's been kind of this is where I've, unbeknownst to me, probably headed all along because I was always very much into fitness. Since I was very young, and understanding just like as I got a little bit older and experienced my own health issues, I still always knew I was more aware of a lot of these things than certainly a lot of the people around me. And it mattered to me, right? It mattered to me like how fit I was, but I didn't really understand in my earlier years the difference between like fitness and healthy. But if I go back, I'd always had an idea of being a coach. In my really early years, it was probably more of a basketball coach. Through my business years, I think I always took a coach approach with my employees, right?
Yep.
Raise them up, kind of coach them up, then give them the tools to go out and help, build the business.
Right.
And then just experiencing my own health issues and being fortunate enough that none of them have really, derailed me from being able to race and do the things I like to do. It's just interesting how it all aligned and that it all made perfect sense. And then realizing that I've got so many friends and colleagues in business that have, faced the very same issues of stress and health and things like that.
Right.
But, a lot of times we just, again, we don't know what we don't know. So we kind of keep, kind of charging ahead. And some to their detriment, some I've lost some friends that earlier, prematurely that, were, kind of running the same, same kind of journey I was in terms of running the business and just, being active in their communities and so on, but just weren't as attentive to their health. And so when I see that, it's ultimately being able to take what I've learned and what I've experienced and kind of put it into practice has been, it's been gratifying for me. But it's also been the more I kind of look back on how I got here, it seems like it's been, kind of predetermined, unbeknownst to me, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting because there's health coaches out there and there's business coaches, but you've kind of brought these two into a unique connection. So tell me a little bit about what you do, who you work with, and how you do that. It's quite obvious you're an entrepreneur, health and wellness coach. So tell me more about how you connect these dots and how you do that.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the approach, one, it's very client centered. So it's the farthest thing from like a one size fits all, but largely when I'm working with clients, they're clients that have been in business for at least some period of time. Like this isn't just, I'm not sure if this is going to be something for me or not. Like they're definitely into the business. They've been in the grind. They've got something they know has potential, but maybe it's taking its toll, right? Maybe it's taking longer to get there. And, they're looking for that, the missing pieces. And a lot of times, we continue to look into the business for that missing piece. And, what I've learned over many years is really the missing piece is more like inside of us, right? It's, it might actually be more health related, or, mindfully, related with it. So a lot of times when I work with my clients, the first thing we probably do is really sit down and really get an understanding around like clarity, right? So a lot of times they're coming to me and they're stressed, right? And or they know they're not feeling as good as they should or as good as they used to, right? So rather than hearing from a doctor, well, you're just getting older, it's not so true, right? Like we can definitely be doing things that we can restore that energy. But so the first thing we really do is kind of get clarity around like what what's going on. Very often it's stress. So we'll jump right in, like just day one, we'll go after what are those stressors? What are the things that are showing up that are causing that stress? Let's alleviate some of that.
Got
Because
it.
once we
Yep.
can alleviate some of that, and again, it might very well be a business related task or process. It might be something internally to you, right?
Hmm.
So we're kind of jumping with that, and then we kind of from there, that's where it gets more individually focused, right, in terms
Got
of
it.
what we need to do. A lot of times we really start working on the business side of it first, and I think that's more so likely because that's where my clients are comfortable. And I know that from my
Right.
history,
Right.
my early years, like, yeah, you want to know what's going on in my life? Let's talk business. Like nothing else, everything else was secondary to it. But then
So
the
are there,
more we,
but are there sort of specific zones that you look at? You talked about stress and stressors in the business, but are you looking
yeah,
like are you
so
kind of looking at different stuff? What are you focusing on?
yeah, so I tend to look at like when we're talking about the health side, I tend to look at four, maybe five, what we call them pillars, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
it's one is stress. The biggest one for me lately, and you and I have talked about, is sleep.
Mm. Yep.
So incredibly powerful. People want to lose
Yep.
weight, so they want to talk diet and exercise, but they don't want to talk. They don't even know to talk about the fact that they're not getting, not even just enough sleep. They're not getting the quality sleep, right? They're not getting that deep sleep, and getting that on a regular basis. That's the only way we can really start to fight the stress. That's the only way we can really start to, you know, reduce the waistline. That's the only way we can really show up to our business with more energy and purpose. you know so it could be the sleep, but the four pillars would be like stress, sleep, exercise, or movement. A lot of
Mm.
people, my clients, they're like, oh, I'm not a gym goer, and that's quite all right, because frankly moving more just functionally throughout the day can be far more valuable than just going to the gym for 30 to 60 minutes 3 or 4 times a week. So we talk about ways that like what works for them, like what gets
Mm.
them moving a little bit more to be more healthy. And then the other one certainly is diet, nutrition. And really, when we talk about, right now, that's so important.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about, like, with just the pandemic and everything going on, we hear so much about wearing masks and washing hands. And unfortunately, what we don't hear more about is how we can really boost our immune system, because the
Right.
gloves, because the washing hands and masks are great in terms of preventing you from getting COVID. But once we have it, or if we get it, right, having that stronger immune system is, likely more important, because it'll probably ward off, our risk of getting it better. But then once we have it, it's going to give us a much better fighting chance that it's going to be very mild.
Mm.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
right. And then just from our life and longevity standpoint, looking at all those four areas, keeping inflammation down, right, proper gut health, also helps, your hormone pathways with stress and things like that as well. But we get into working on those different pillars as it relates to what's really going on with my clients. So sometimes I'll give them a little nudge in some certain areas because they're just completely missing it. Other times, we simply follow where they know they need to go.
Got it. That's yeah, that's really helpful. So we're getting close to having talked for 60 minutes. So I want to be honorable of your time here, but um, when you because you particularly look at the connection between an entrepreneur and their health. And help them with that and really support them. But do you see any major landmines, like entrepreneurs just keep doing this and they don't realize they're about to blow up? It's like something's going to hit them at some point. But what are some of the landmines that entrepreneurs in particular, not the general population, but entrepreneurs
Yeah.
can get themselves, in a major hole on?
Yeah. I think the one is, I'll deal with my health next year.
Mm.
Right. It's, and again, it comes back to that singular focus that, every year is like the year, right, that we're going to, kind of ratchet it up a notch, and or just we have the stress or pressure to get to, whether it's the million, or for the million now we got to get to the 5, right? There's always that, you know, the stress of making the next level, right, and keeping the momentum going forward. And so often it's, I don't have time to work on my health.
Mm.
So that, that's probably like the biggest blind
Yeah.
spot we have. Um, do we have time to work on our health, or are we going to have to spend the time working on our illness? Is one of the things I like to share with them at times,
That's
right?
good. That's good.
Because just spending a little bit of time every day, just being a little more mindful about what are our eating habits going to look like this week? How can we make some better choices? Yes, I've got my business schedule, but for me personally, I always scheduled in my run to my my weekly schedules. So whether it might come at 5:30 in the morning, it might come at 6:30 at night, it might actually come at 11 a.m. before I while I'm transitioning from maybe one office to another, or to a sales call or something like that. So just finding time for it, because if we don't, then we're laid up, right? And or then all of a sudden we're on some crazy medications where we're not able to continue the pursuit. And that's a risk reward thing too. I mean, just from, can your business afford you not to be there?
Right.
So it's far easier to be have a proactive mindset versus a reactive mindset around it. And that's something I really like to emphasize to my clients, right? And or anybody that I'm talking with on that.
So number one, like if you were to say it, it's like putting your health off to a future date. Is there another landmine that you come across?
I think going back to it, like if somebody says, give me one bit of advice, I would say, really nail down your sleep, habits and consistency and schedule, right? Like just get that under control, because that truly will. I know personally for me, if I don't sleep well, I make lesser choices during the next day, right? So I'm obviously not as attentive or alert in a meeting, or I'm going for, some sort of caffeine to kind of just keep me driving through. But by 5 o'clock, I'm like, kind of a rough day. I'm gonna skip the gym, or I'm gonna skip my workout. And typically, if I skip my workout, I head for maybe the bag of chips versus the the healthier option, right? I think it's just natural. So, the lack of sleep just generates more stress around us. It generates more inflammation, and just creates all kinds of things. But I think that there are three things for I think us to look at, whether entrepreneurs or not. But I think one is really getting a little bit better understanding of what gut health means. There's so much conversation around it today, but learning how to just eat better, eat healthier. It'll serve you all day long. I think the other one is just kind of looking at your environment, because these are the three things that are going to truly impact your health. It's your gut and the things that you eat, and just how your body restores. It's the environment around you, whether there are toxins in your home, whether it's the soil you're planting things in, or where you're getting your foods from. And the third one is really getting a handle on your stress. Right. I think those three are really, really important.
Right. So with those three, if you were to give an insider pro tip, because I mean, you've been working on this for a long time, and you've had your own situations, health situations that have come up. If you could put a lever down on those ones and really ratchet up the best insider tips that you've learned for those three, what are the three on gut health, on stress, and on environment? What are three things that you would suggest people do something about very quickly?
Yeah, I think with the gut health, just go more towards real whole foods. I wouldn't even start with go plant-based, go red meat-based. I mean, there's vegans and, there are all kinds of people out there, right? The idea is, when it comes time to either pick up the donut or the avocado, can we get a little more understanding around why the avocado is actually really a great choice, and a really tasty choice too? And, forego the donut a little bit more, but really it's eating real whole foods.
Right.
Most foods, like if you pick up in the grocery store, it's got one ingredient. The biggest key though, just in terms of working towards that, does, anything you're going to pick up and eat, does it have 5 ingredients or less? Chances are it's going to be pretty healthy.
Interesting.
And I think with the gut health too is just really trying to avoid processed sugar. So that'd be the big one there. I think in terms of environmental toxins, just being aware of what again, it's environmental toxins are where your food's coming from as well, right? There's so much weed control and things used in the soils nowadays that were not used back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They didn't even exist. but we're trying to produce so much food so fast now that a lot of even going and getting your vegetables, eat organic, and somebody said to me the other day, but organic's so expensive. I'm like, but it's not as expensive as the doctor's appointment, right? So it's just more awareness around that. And you can eat organic, frozen organic, you can eat canned organic. I mean, there are a lot of ways to actually eat organic that are not necessarily the fresh produce that is maybe, 50, 75% more expensive than what you buy otherwise. But super important. I mean, that's when we start to understand why, to eat those things, it starts to make perfect sense and you naturally gravitate towards those things. But environmental toxins, or even like the cleaning products you use, the soaps you use, so many soaps have, heavy metals and things like that in them. So there are so many great organic cleaning products. There's so many products, even from deodorants, things like that, soaps that don't have all these fragrances and chemicals in them that serve you well. And the third one, just, being stress, the big one there, a couple of tips there, just learn to breathe, right? For many of us, just learn to breathe. And the second, I think, thing to support your stress is really focus on the sleep, because once we get more sleep, we have a much better chance at managing the stress.
Yeah. That's really good.
So I threw a few things at you there, but
great ideas, really good ideas. So you are a coach. You work with people. You help them, entrepreneurs specifically. I don't think you limit yourself to just entrepreneurs. If other people need your help, you're absolutely willing to help them. But how you have room in your practice right now for more clients? Tell me a little bit about your coaching practice right now.
Yeah, I'm largely working, one-on-one with clients right now. So I take a limited number for the time being. I may stretch out to some group programs in the future because I really do want to, be an educator, a messenger for a healthier lifestyle. So it doesn't necessarily restrict me just to business owners and entrepreneurs, but it's certainly a place that I know well, and I know they have a real need for this.
Right. Wonderful. Well, Mike, is there any final words you'd like to give me today, give to anyone who's watching us today, before we wrap it?
I think just, look around, read a little bit. There's so much information out there now on even, call it holistic lifestyles. I think they get a little bit of a bad rap, but the reality is, any of the functional medicine or holistic doctors I've worked with all have MDs, right? So I think, we're in a day and age where we certainly don't simply defer to our, professionals anymore. Like, we definitely ask more questions, but don't hesitate to ask those. I see them, interconnecting more and more. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I think the functional medicine approach is going to have to be the approach, because if we're just simply diagnosing and treating, and we've already seen it, right? We have so many medications and that people are on that it just, it's not going to serve us as a society, let alone individually. But, but take a look at it. It's, they're just taking the deeper dive and helping you understand, why you feel the way you do and or what's going on. And it positions you to, I think, to make some really healthy choices for yourself.
Good. Well, Mike, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and history and your experience. And what's a yoo-hoo?
Yeah, I grew up on Yoo-hoo, I think, when
I don't know what it is. I was trying to make sense of it when I read your bio, and I went, I don't know what a Yoo-hoo is. Is it like a donut or something?
No, it's actually it's a chocolate drink, but it's almost more like chocolate and water. Like, there's really probably nothing very organic about it. Unfortunately, it's very processed. It's probably chocolate, water, and a few sweeteners in there to make it taste relatively good. But unfortunately, that's nature of, those of us growing up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like, we were introduced to all this processed food. And it was so readily available to us that wasn't there when, our parents' generation. So I no longer look at it and say we're better off than they were, because we're not, right? They had their lifestyle, but they were largely eating organic because that's what food was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will below this video. I'll make sure we connect to your website and your socials, and make sure people can connect with you. But Mike, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience. And go out and run some more today, hopefully.
That sounds good. Tom, thanks very much for having me.
All
It
right.
was a pleasure.
Cheers.
Bye.